Hi everyone. I am so humbled by and appreciative of all of your support. It truly helps me to keep going every day. And knowing that you're all out there and listening is amazing. Please do not forget to like and share and comment. I promise to read each and every one, and it really helps me out a lot. Also, if you have a personal dogman encounter you'd like to send to me, email me all the details at the link in the description below. Thanks again. And now, let's get on to the stories. Brockway Mountain Drive is one of the most beautiful places in the world. I was in the service for almost 10 years. I saw a lot of the world, and still, that place between Copper Harbor and the Upson Lake Nature Sanctuary is one of the most beautiful. But on that day in December, the beauty was lost on me. My car was a mess. It was this rusted old coughing Ford Escort mini station wagon. It was on its last breath, but I really thought I could squeeze one more winter out of it. But as I rolled to the top of the Brockway Plateau just west of Copper Harbor, I had had enough. It died. It would not start, and it immediately got cold as a witch's titty in a brass bra. I already had a rusted-out floorboard that caused snow and or slush to spit up in my face while I was driving, and the passenger window was double-thick saran wrap duct taped together. When it died on the top of the hill, I took a minute and got out and had a smoke, then prepared for the ritual. The ritual was me heaving to push the car down the hill and pop the clutch to get it started. Today, my hope was only to make it back home. I had to get a new car. The time had come. I put it in neutral and pushed the Escort to the edge of the plateau with the driver's door open, gave her one last shove and jumped in, and down the hill I went. Shit! I popped the clutch, and for the first time the damn thing did not turn over. It rolled to the lull at the bottom of the hill and just stopped. Shit. Now I was stuck here until someone came along to give me a ride, and I had no idea how long that was going to be. And to make things worse, I was down to my last smoke. I did not even bother to push the Escort off the road. I was just so pissed off I sat there and lit up my last Marlboro. I was leaning back, cold as hell, and facing west, looking at the snow, trees, and the little tiny unlined, patched-up, pothole-ridden pavement, when a giant animal walks dead center, about 200 yards away. I almost choked on my cigarette. I felt all the hair on my body standing straight up. I lived in the Upper Peninsula, and we got so used to things we sometimes forget that we are in the wilderness up here. And what the hell was this thing? I remember thinking, oh my God, as it stopped in the middle of the road and just started casually walking towards me. I was so terrified for so many reasons. It was big. It was coming at me. I was alone in a car that would not start. I had no idea what the hell it was. I immediately started turning the ignition. Come on, come on, come on. I started screaming. I was about to get out and run back up the hill to the plateau to the east behind me, the same hill I had just rolled down, but to my shock, the Escort started. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. I was so happy. Then this crazy-looking walking dog started yelling and began charging at me on all fours like a bull galloping at me. I wheeled the Escort wagon around and puttered my way up the hill. I had already accepted death. That Escort wagon would not make it away from a child on a big wheel. All I could do was floor it and hope I purred up the hill and made it over the peak to the other side, headed towards Copper Harbor. I was so thankful the car did not die on me. I looked back and saw the devil spawn standing on the top of the hill, all proud and boastful, howling and screaming. Please make it back to town, I kept saying. And I made it back to town. After that, I did get another car, but I never sold the Escort. I just couldn't part with her after she saved my life from that dog man. For the majority of my life, I've primarily lived in the panhandle of Florida, all the way from Jacksonville to Tallahassee and everywhere in between. I don't venture much to South Florida, or even Central. It's too hot. And I prefer the northern climate where you still get a bit of southern hospitality and the swampiness. There's just something about it I really enjoy. And not to mention avoiding the majority of hurricanes, even though being up here you're still at risk. Anyway, one night I believe I saw something that I can't quite explain, that I don't feel really fits the description of what many would claim to be a Bigfoot. Right around my house are a lot of thick swamps, and I was driving home one night, probably around 7 o'clock at night. The sun was near setting, so there was still a little bit of light outside. As I turned a corner, this figure had its back towards me, and all I saw was hair. I didn't think he was standing upright at first, or at least not all the way, because as I came around the corner and my headlights lit it up, it turned and almost kind of twisted its whole body to meet my oncoming car, with the headlights illuminating its face. The first thing I noticed was that it was most certainly not a deer, and how ugly it was. But in just a few seconds, my eyes ventured down to see what it had in its arms. It looked to me like it was putting a deer in a headlock, and then I realized that this thing had hands like a person, but with long black claws at the end of each finger. This thing had apparently snapped the neck of a deer and was holding its limp neck in its hand. As my eyes went back up to meet this thing, it had a very ugly face. Think of like a mix between a dog and a monkey, or a bat. Very short-snouted, but very much like a dog, just really ugly. Maybe not like a short-snouted dog like a pug. Think more like a wolf or German shepherd with a much shorter snout, and teeth protruding, and much uglier, like the eyes were sunken in. It looked kind of creepy looking, and then my eyes went back down to it holding or hiding its deer, and then it quickly turned its back again, as if to hide what it had. But at this point, I had just driven past it. All this happened, what I described to you, in a matter of probably 5 seconds as I approached it. It was the creepiest thing ever. This was no more than probably 3 miles away from my house. The entire road is surrounded by bald cypress trees, Spanish moss growing everywhere. This thing, creature, animal, call it whatever you want, was right between the trees and the road. I'm not sure why it appeared to be trying to hide the fact that it killed a deer and was holding it by its broken neck, all while acting like it was hiding what it was doing, like it was trying to do something in secret. I'm still not sure. Again, I've lived here for most of my life and I've never seen anything like it. Come to think of it, though, I've had friends who claim they've seen a skunk ape, and I've never seen nor heard that either. I've seen everything that Florida pretty much has to offer in much of the South as far as wildlife goes. This was a first for me. Southwick, Massachusetts, 2004. Back in 2004, I moved back in with my parents to their small town of Southwick, Massachusetts. My husband stayed in our home in Springfield because of work, but I moved in with my parents when I was pregnant with our third child. My other 2 sons were around 5 and 3 years old at the time, and a helping hand around the house was much appreciated. My parents had lived in Southwick their entire lives. They were childhood neighbors before they got married. That's just one example of how close-knit this community is. It was the kind of place where you could walk to the next-door farm, pick all the vegetables you needed, and leave money on the front porch or by the kitchen window. My sons were thrilled to be here. They now had a bigger playground and more areas to wander. I didn't mind because the town was so small that you could step out on the front porch and see everything. The house was on an elevated hill and had fields surrounding it. The largest field was behind our house, which bordered Southwick Woods, a forest with historic significance. There were many fields and farms throughout the town, resembling the layout of other towns in Massachusetts, and my parents' house was a typical New England home. Big windows, built around gardens, with a large front porch. Dad was part of a local municipal committee, which kept him busy a few days a week, and Mom had worked as a primary school teacher for a decade when all of us moved out for college. This was no surprise because it's effortless for her to engage with children. She was a great help with my boys, too, even though they could be a handful. One morning, my eldest son, Jake, greeted us in an absolute state of disarray. He said that he had heard loud noises at night, and when he looked out his window, he saw a werewolf staring right at him. We initially took it as a kid's wild imagination until his younger brother came in from outside playing one day, crying. He said that he saw a giant wolf's head peeking from the trees behind the house. Since that day, both of my sons have refused to go outside. They say they both saw the wolf creature a few more times, but no adults were ever able to confirm. My dad would say that it was just a harmless wolf that had lost its way, but Mom would argue that barely any large wildlife has come this close to the town for more than 10 years. I'd worry a lot when the boys would start crying, but I never gave it too much further thought. Mainly because even if it really was a wolf sighting, someone else would have likely seen it, or the local newspaper would have mentioned the sightings. Things took a steep turn when Mom found large dog-type footprints all over the field behind our house. And days later, Dad's committee received the first official sightings of an abnormally large wolf lurking in the woods. It was the first time we started to believe the boys' encounter stories, but we were still confused by what it really was, especially with everyone stating that its size was enormous. Starting to get scared of the situation, particularly since the woods were right behind our house, my dad borrowed 2 German shepherds from the police chief, who was out of town for the weekend. I was overjoyed with the dogs coming to stay with us, and especially the sense of safety and distraction that the boys felt when the dogs arrived. But I questioned how they would stand a chance against any wolf that's described as a freak of nature. The following nights were uneventful, and the neighborhood might have forgotten about the wolf. Then on Sunday night, the evening before the police chief would come to collect his dogs, I woke up from a series of awful barks. I asked my mom to stay with the boys as Dad and I took the dogs and walked outside expecting a trespasser. Dad took his sidearm with him, even though it had been years since he practiced target shooting. We ran towards the backyard and followed the sound of the dogs barking at the edge of the forest. It was dark and neither of us could spot anyone or anything. So we tried soothing the dogs, but with little success. They kept barking until, strangely, one of them started whimpering. I strained my eyes to see in the darkness and was able to make out a dark black figure emerging from the long line of trees. It had a man-like build, walking on 2 legs, but was strangely large, probably 7 or 8 feet tall. It had black hair and a long bushy tail. Dad seemed frozen, not knowing how to react. I was feeling a deep sense of fear as I watched the creature step into the moonlight with determination. It had eyes as red as blood, and I would bet that they could be seen half a mile away. The head was like a wolf, but bigger. Both of the dogs started to whine and ran back to the makeshift shed adjacent to the house. I could not make out what was standing in front of me. It looked ferocious, and I was feeling stuck and helpless in the nightmare. And then the creature screeched the most dreadful howl and returned back into the woods. It all happened in a second. Dad's hand was shaking as he tried to grab the firearm from its holster, but I stopped him. There's no need to make things any worse or make the creature more angry. We quickly made our way back to the house, and we were still shaking from the incident as we walked inside. Dad spent the entire night processing what he had just seen. Within 24 hours, my husband came and took me and the kids back to our house in Springfield. Mom and Dad didn't want to come with us. They said that they'd been there all their lives and it's all they know. Of course, I can't stop worrying about them. No one ever encountered the dogman again. No further sightings were reported. My parents never did move away, and in fact, they got their own dog shortly after we left. I'm sure they both feel safer now. But I still get shivers remembering that night and thinking how I wish I never knew that creatures like that prowl in the dark.